ClearValue Tax keeps popping up in my feed. So I've been catching some of his videos. And I think I watch a lot of like CNBC clips and Bloomberg clips. On YouTube, at least that's what my autoplay does. And then this guy keeps popping up. So I saw a video from today or yesterday talking about the Fed pivot and kind of inspired this episode. Wasn't even really planning on doing any recording today. Talk about that in a minute. Something comes along with this territory right now, and I don't hear people talking about it, is the unemployment lag. And, one of the companies I own works with the people that get displaced during a layoff, for example. And we kind of have like firsthand knowledge of what's really going on. The first thing I want to note is significant increase in layoffs. That business unit is up triple digits in the last 60 days, maybe 75 days. Layoffs are way up, and that's just the tip of the iceberg from what we can tell from feedback from other clients. Not really being reflected in the news. And I something that the ClearValue guy said, like what you heard on the news doesn't really seem to match up with. They kept saying that Powell was going to be dovish, but everything he's been saying has been hawkish. The news has this narrative, and it's, don't listen to it. You got to go look at the data, go look at the stuff for yourself, and then make a decision on what you're going to do. Excuse me. And you look at they're really trying to pump up how strong the labor markets are. And so we got this theory going on the news channels that, someone's going to get laid off from XYZ company. And because we have 11 million job openings, they're just going to run over to another company and just get hired 2 days later. That's not often what happens. And so we see it two ways. One is through our outplacement business that deals with displaced employees, and we help people get back to work faster. Companies pay us to do that. A lot of times people aren't that motivated to get back to work. But the second thing, if you own companies, if you employ people, and if you pay unemployment tax, you notice this thing that happens where when someone gets laid off or let go for whatever reason, if you know business owners, for example, they'll talk about this. Someone gets laid off or someone gets fired, let go for whatever reason. Often, they'll sit on unemployment all the way to the end, and then they'll go really put some effort into a job search. And even then, sometimes they don't. We saw this a lot in 2008, where we're calling people up for, I own recruiting companies too. We're calling people up in the automotive industry. It's like, hey, we have this job down at this tier 1. And, people would just straight up say, hey, my wife's an RN. We make good money. I got some house projects I still want to work on. I got, the extended unemployment for whatever, 3 or 6 more months. I'm just going to wait until then. And you realize how many people will just sit on the sidelines until the money runs out. So we had this theory that if we lay off 5 million people and the economy's crashing, that because we have 11 million job openings, that they're just going to go over there, they're going to get another job, and everything's just going to keep on moving. So the crash won't be as bad as you think it's going to be. But I don't know if that's what's going to happen, because what you often see happen is people will sit on the sidelines for 6 or 12 months, and there's a lag. And I don't know if we're talking about the lag. If 5 million people get displaced through layoffs and a big crash, then they don't go back to the workforce, and they're not getting them. Now they're getting $1,300 a month instead of they were making $6,000 a month. Now that money's not getting fed back into the economy, right? So now all of a sudden you're going to watch revenues drop. You're going to watch earnings get readjusted. Do you see the picture I'm painting here? And I think this kind of got backed by this theory that in the last, 2.5 years since COVID started, you realize that given the option, people will, if they can find a way to just get by, they'll just get by. And I've said this my whole life because that's the environment I grew up in. People would, we were in a working class neighborhood at best. If you could find a way to game the system and get food stamps, to get anything, just enough to be at $1 left at the end of the month, and get that fresh money on the 1st or 15th, then that's what we did. That was a lot of the neighborhood, right? And you kind of saw that people aren't motivated to go build a great career or get financially set up by 35, or you don't hear a lot of people talking about retiring early anymore. Unless they're in that like top 5 or 10% of earners, or in the tech world, or somewhere in finance, and they got this master plan to retire at 45 and play golf and travel. A lot of people are just looking to get by. So the Powell wants to get unemployment up, which the ClearValue guy talked about. If you've been listening to the Fed meetings, he's been saying that. He's been targeting 4.3 to 4.5% unemployment. Well, how many people do you think are going to get let go of their jobs to get to that number? And the one thing that listening to the ClearValue guy for a few, the Fed doesn't have this finite touch. He doesn't have the drop shot of Roger Federer, where he can just kind of feather a little backhand backspin and drop it right over the net. He doesn't have that. It's funny to think that the Fed has that much control, that they can rise and lower rates and do easing or tightening and just make the economy go up and down at their will. I don't believe that. It seems like a lot of economists and analysts believe that. If it was that simple, we wouldn't even be in this mess to begin with, right? So the fact that we're just going to, we can crash the economy. You pump the rates up enough, we know we can crash it. But you can't just snap your fingers and then create a new boom with massive GDP growth and high employment and huge earnings. It's just not at the fingertips of the Fed to do that. So I think we're giving them too much credit. So we're looking at the storyline of the employment markets are strong, the Fed's going to pivot, like all this stuff, and what I see is going to happen is a bunch of people are going to get laid off. Some of them are going to go back to work. Some will not. And you're not going to see them re-enter the workforce until 6 to 12 months after the bust. And that's if you're lucky, right? So there's going to be a lag to that. And during that time, they're going to have less disposable income. You're going to be looking for additional unemployment, boosters to unemployment. The government under the last 2 presidents just love giving out money, it seems. Everyone's looking for a handout right now, so why go back to work? We will not work our way out of this recession unless it gets bad enough. That was a difference between 2000 and 2008 and now. Back then, people would work 2 or 3 jobs. They would do whatever they had to do, and now it's kind of like, well, I shouldn't have to do that. That mentality is gonna hurt us if things get bad. So again, we're looking at this thing where the layoffs are hitting. People won't return to the workforce. They're going to spend less money. Interest rates are going up, which is already taking money out of people's pockets. The real estate market's cooling off. There's layoffs happening. This will suck the money out of the economy that Powell wants. But with that, revenue's going to drop, and then earnings are going to drop, and then you're going to watch the stock market come down. The people on TV keep blabbing about once you hit these lows, and they got some mathematics, 17%, blah, blah, I don't know. I can't even listen to it anymore. That you rarely ever test those lows again. So they think the bottom is in. And I'm like, you think the bottom's in, but the layoffs haven't started yet. You think the bottom's in, but a lot of the earnings haven't been readjusted yet that you're going to see affected from a slowdown. And I think ClearValue was talking about this too. Like the housing market, I'm not sure he said it's cooled. I've seen it cool in certain markets. It's cooled, but it hasn't crashed. But you're saying we saw a bottom. There's all these things that people are saying based on some historical blah, 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 that the bottom's in. Like, I just don't know if Wall Street and everyone has fully factored in what may or may not happen here. Obviously, it got bumped down like a normal correction. But I don't know if that was factoring in all the macro issues that might be coming our way. So I'm thinking we're going to retest those lows or possibly blow through. I don't know how low it would go. I just know I don't think we've seen all the bad news yet. And it seems like if you watch the news, which Clearview was talking about, the narrative doesn't match up with what reality is. I don't hear the news channels talking about the layoffs, but I'm watching our business that deals with displaced workers go up 100+% in a couple months. Why is that not on the news? And how strong the job market, all this stuff, and it's like, I don't know, man. There's little strange things that I'm paying attention to that probably don't matter. You used to not just see Camus wine sitting on the end of a shelf somewhere. And I was in a gourmet store yesterday. Usually you had to call and you had to like try to get an allotment. They would set some aside for you. And I'm walking through the store. I was making some pasta last night. And it's right on the end rack where they're trying to like really push, they're trying to move some bottles. Right in the main aisle, right on the end. And I'm thinking, I've never seen Camus sitting on a rack like that before. Now, two thoughts crossed my mind. Maybe this year's Camus just sucks. Well, I had it last night and it doesn't because I saw it there and I grabbed the bottle. But it's like, two, are people not buying these luxury items as much? And you've seen the Rolex market kind of crash, the luxury watch market started to crash. Exotic cars are starting to cool. They're actually starting to see, there's a time when, the last 18 months, you couldn't find a McLaren or a Lamborghini anywhere that was, within a fair price. And I'm driving by lots now and you're starting to see them out there. So you can see that bubble's kind of popped and things have started to cool. And you see these little cracks where people are spending less money. Again, there's multiple things going on here. And I'm not saying seeing a bottle of Camus on the end of a rack is a telltale sign of the economy's crashing. It's just you see people pulling back, either because their pockets are tight or they're preparing for something. Hopefully, people are preparing for something that's never going to happen. I hope we don't crash. I keep saying that. It's because I talk about this stuff. People think, well, you wanted to crash. I don't want to crash. I got a couple companies I'm trying to build and sell in the next couple of years. I got a couple new startups I'm working on. I want things to boom. I need things to boom. But, just because you want something doesn't mean that's what's going to happen. And that's where it's like, well, I got to step back and say, I got money tied up in 6, 7, 8 different entities right now. A couple new ones coming online. It's like, well, how do we navigate this next, 24 to 36 months? And nobody knows. But it's like you look at this stuff and to think that the Fed has got the whole economy, like they're just puppet master. They have some control, but when you realize how much control they don't have, it's scary. And then looking at how strong this job market is, I don't think people understand how fast that thing falls apart. And we're just not that culture right now that is, I'll go do any job, I'll get my hands dirty, I'll roll my sleeves up, I'll do whatever I have to do to pay my bills, feed my family. We're now so used to the money that came out during COVID, the college debt forgiveness. We constantly look to the government to solve our problems now. And I think about growing up without much money. It's like, well, every financial problem I ever had, I worked my way out of it. Working 3 jobs as a teenager, working, 2 jobs through my 20s as I started companies. There was no replacement for hard work in that sense. And today people believe that there is a replacement for hard work, and it's the government. So it's like the work from home thing. I'm going to do another episode on that. We get it's another company I'm involved with, Kane over at Daggerfin, and Kane does a lot of employer branding consulting, working with employers to help attract better talent and all that stuff. And the question gets presented to him, well, how do we get people back in the office? And, we're on a phone call one day, and it's like, Kane, I'm thinking about my circle of friends and people that work at, Fortune 100s, like they're executives, people that own their own businesses. They're all struggling with the same thing. And I think the general consensus is people won't go back to work until they're given no choice. See, now they still have a choice. And you're watching, even Elon over there with his cult. I think he's having trouble at Tesla getting people back in the office. Because if push comes to shove and it says, come to the office or you're fired, they're like, well, screw you. The job market's so hot, I can just go get a job somewhere else. Until that's taken away, good luck getting people back in the office. And I think if we have a major crash, You watch unemployment go up to 5, 6, 7%, and people are faced with go back in the office or you might not get another job for 12 or 18 months. Well, if you got a mortgage and kids to feed and all this stuff to do, you're probably going to take your ass back to the office. So I'm looking at this next 2 or 3 years where there's going to be a lot of turmoil in the workforce, unemployment. There's going to be a rebalancing of things where before it was very employer driven, and now it's very, very candidate and employee driven. It never works that well when one side's got too much power. There's got to be some kind of balance. So there's going to be a rebalancing there. The other issue is you see a lot of these companies that are laying people off. A lot of them are over bloated tech companies, ideas that just got a bunch of funding. And I'm harping on the employment thing because that's what you keep hearing on the news, that this is what's going to save us. Look, if you're a programmer at some XYZ startup and you get, they downsize, they had 500 people, they downsize to 100 and you get let go. Who's to say there's another job for you out there? Many of the jobs that are open right now, we need welders. We need truck drivers. We need someone to be a production manager at a manufacturing shop. Maybe you can translate your tech skills over somehow to SAP and help work with SAP within a manufacturing environment, but then you still have to have production planning knowledge, let's say, or materials management to work within the SAP software at the manufacturing company. There's all these things that, so as far as keeping a chair warm like a body, yes, these people will lose their jobs and it's a new body on the market to do a job somewhere. But they're not really qualified to do the jobs that are open, or they just don't want to do those jobs. We have a tremendous amount of pain coming, I think, in society if we don't get that rebalance, because we need someone to drive the truck to get the food to the grocery store. We need someone to stock the shelf. We don't need no one to check us out no more. Technology fixed that part. We're short on nurses. We're short on teachers. What is the economic ramifications over this over the next 2 to 5 years? We'll see. I don't know there's a Fed pivot anytime soon. I think the market was very defiant just to close this thing out. They're trying to raise rates. The markets had one of those gigantic, like foam WWE middle fingers that they didn't care. The market just kept, we're going to go on, we're going to bounce back, call a dead cat bounce if you want, bounce back, roaring up. I'm watching, the Dow bust up, past 33 again. S&P over 4,000, 4,100. I'm not even looking anytime recently. And the market's like kind of F you. And the Fed's going to keep beating on rates and until they get what they want. They're coming for their pound of flesh. Because if they don't get that pound of flesh, inflation is going to keep getting worse. It's going to keep compounding, and they're going to get in a real goddamn mess. Let's not even factor in all the political aspects of this with the election coming up and how do you fit in the economic planning and where the economy is going to be for the 2024 election. So I just don't think the Fed's a puppet master everyone thinks they are. It sounds like they're going to remain hawkish. I don't believe we've seen bottom. I hope we've seen bottom. I just think there's too much bad news coming to say that the bottom's in. And we're going to deal with a tremendous amount of employment issues and keeping people working and keeping society moving in the next 12 to 18 months. That I just don't know if you're going to see companies keep pumping out the earnings they need. Again, we're basing a lot of our data on these earnings from the past and the future, and that's going to probably shift. You've seen it shift on some. You saw guidances change. FedEx is coming out and saying I can't say shit today. Worldwide recession coming. They're seeing it. There's people can't get workers to get stuff done. If you don't have workers, you can't deliver goods and services. If you can't deliver goods and services, you can't make money. Can't make money. Well, we got a whole other issue on top of productivity. Productivity is at some low since 1947 or something I heard. It used to take a company 10 people to do this. Now they got to hire 14 people to do the same job to get the same productivity. And on top of it, pay the 14 people more money. This is going to eat into profits. Now we get into this, wage inflation spiral because, people are less productive. I got to hire more of them and pay more. I got to raise my price. Now everything's more expensive. I mean, that's probably the only thing I've heard from professors and the economists that's right. We don't get that under control, we're screwed. But they're going to get that under control because they're going to keep pushing the numbers until Powell hits that 4.5%. Again, he doesn't have that Roger Federer drop shot. If he could just like slowly tweak tightening and interest rates to get unemployment right to 4.5%, yeah, we wish we had that much control. They're either going to undershoot it or overshoot it. So we're going to end up at 4.1%, and things aren't going to be where he wants. Or we might be looking at 5% plus in unemployment, maybe even as much as 6, because it takes what they said 6 or 12 months to really figure out the full effect of the interest rate raises. We don't know, and by the time we know, it's too late. So, anyways, I wanted to add some additional thoughts to the ClearValue thing that popped up. Dude keeps popping up on my channel. Maybe I've watched the All In podcast. If you guys like this stuff, check out the All In podcast. I try to do a recap on that series once a week because a lot of times they don't always go into things that I wanted to hear more about. And it's like, well, I'm going to expand on some of those topics or maybe hear some of the things I didn't caught. And I kind of felt the same way about the ClearValue Tax guy. I keep wanting to say ClearView for some reason. ClearValue Tax channel. Anyways, what are your thoughts? Where are we going in the next 12 months? Do you think we've tested bottom in the stock market? Where do you see unemployment going? And do you think we're going to be able to keep people productive enough to not bring our economy to a grinding halt? Let me know your comments below.